38 laps stand between the drivers and the checkered flag here under the lights at the Yas Marina circuit. A lot of people will be keen to see just how Zhou Guanyu will fare today.
They're certainly further forward than we expected. Let's see what they can do from P4.
Here we go. It's time to go racing. Hold on tight. It's the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And it's lights out and away we go.
Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer. Welcome back to F1 Manager 23. It's episode 77. It's the final race of the season. We've got a decent start. Neither one of them beginning from the back. They're ahead of a few cars, both Tanaka and Flores. And really, the last couple of races, they've been much closer to each other. And also, now that we are finally on to that last race of the season and there's no parts to hold over to the next race, Tanaka, who's ahead right now, has the same components as Flores in this race. I think the only exception, where last race we had 5 weaker components on Tanaka's car, today, front wing. That's the only thing. So Tanaka has a weaker front wing, but otherwise they have the same car. The one difference beyond that front wing with the two of them today is that Tanaka had her gearbox beat up a couple races back, and we've had to use it to finish out the season. So it's in the 30 percentile. It's got quite a bit of wear to it, mostly down to that accident where she got hit behind by an AlphaTauri. Was it Maloney or Hadjar? I think it was Hadjar who did that one. But for now, not a great start as Tanaka's 17th, Flores' 19th. In terms of pacing, a one-stop strategy at this track is about 2 seconds slower expected. Raw, without other cars around, without DRS. 2 seconds slower than a two-stopper. But we already know that Tanaka can't. Oh, I thought I was set to push. We didn't push. No wonder we were a little slow off the line. Crap. Well, anyway. I didn't set the fuel down either. Well, my bad. That's going to alter our strategy a little bit in this race. No wonder we had a bit of a slow start. I wasn't pushing. I didn't under fuel. It's the last race of the season. We're going to be doing a lot more pushing today, especially with the fuel the way it is. But anyway, the two-stopper will be our strategy for Tanaka. It's obvious because she can't make a one-stopper work. Not good enough on tires. For Flores, just seemed like we could be more aggressive today. Well, she's last, so we're going to have to be more aggressive. Speaking of more aggressive, let's see if they can't move up. Tanaka, that's all it took. We turned the engine up. She went to P17, just like that. So we've got her in some clean air for a little bit. With DRS, she does drop back down the order, but Flores does get around Maloney and will start to close up on her teammate. Backs off. Both of them kind of close it up. If they take each other out, not that big of a deal. We're not in the points. We don't seem to have that kind of pace today. Some ways off everybody else. Hadjar's already 4.5 seconds behind the next car as Flores moves ahead of Tanaka. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's something to do with the gap in the tire wear between the pair right now. There we go. Flores closing back up. Can she make a move? There is a yellow. Not seeing who. It was brief. Porsche just with a lockup. Go inside, we go outside. That's on the mediums for Hadjar. So he's lacking pace and... Alright, pushing to pull away. And let's settle in. It's almost time for a pit, so go aggressive. What happened to overtaking Hadjar? We gained like 3 seconds of the car ahead of us and lost it. I'm going to ignore. We're going to go one more lap here with Flores. Flores has the ability where Tanaka doesn't, so we're going to let Tanaka pit first on this lap. .25 flat. It's been ages since we've had a good stop. Ages. And we've been very consistent for like half this season on our pit stop times. Florsh down pit road for her first stop of the day. 2:4.31, a little better. That's what our average is supposed to be, is 2:4 average. We haven't even had a 2:4 in races, like 4, 5 races, 6 races since we've had. Not true. There's been a couple 2.3s over the last like 6 races. Otherwise, everything's been a 2.5 or worse. That as a 2.4 is one of the best stops we've had in a while. As we get up to temperature, it's 19th and 20th for us, but there's many cars that will pit and we'll have a chance to undercut here. This is where things should open up for us. We're ahead of Hadjar, we're ahead of Porsche, and Hadjar immediately overtakes Tanaka. And there's only a few seconds between our two drivers too, so it's not like things have opened up for us. We are lacking pace a little bit. Usually I underfuel, and we have very much not done that here. Hadjar already pit, but put on softs. Very different racing strategy here. Lap 29 already here on this last race. Definitely speeding things along. Not much left to go for while we're out there. But Tanaka is now 9 seconds behind on her own. She's way off the pace on these hards. 24 laps to go. Let's push for a little bit for Tanaka. Try to close it up. Drugovich does their last stop. Comes out ahead of us already. Florsh is overtaking Maloney. 5 seconds behind Hadjar. 63%. Let's push. Magnussen is just pit, but Magnussen's already on the softs. That's a little early, and actually there's a bunch of cars already on the softs. They're going to struggle at the end of this race. Maloney's at 33% right now, and we can't hardly overtake or get away from. With DRS, Maloney easily overtakes us. Yeah, we do not have very good pace today. Certainly not on these hard. Our drivers always seem to be really off the pace when they're on the hard compound. And we're seeing that right now. Maloney pits. That's now Drugovich behind us on mediums. Relatively new ones, already down to 77%. It has been quite a few laps. Porsche with a crash here with 15 laps to go. I was hoping for a VSC to clean up some debris or get the car out of the way, but he will continue on. So Florsh, one more lap. Tanaka will pit this lap. Tanaka, the final stop of the season. And we finally get a good one in for her. No, it's even slower. 2.666. Well off the pace of what is her normal. And she is already well behind. 10 seconds behind Porsche, who's almost 20 seconds behind Maloney. Florsh at 2.449. There's that average stop of ours. Never anything very good. But a couple 2.4s today anyway. So that's 18th and 20th. With about 22 seconds in between Tanaka and Florsh. 10 laps to go. 3 seconds and we're chasing Maloney, who undercut us, and Hadjar. And we're not beating a single team right now. Florsh chasing down the 2 AlphaTauris. One, actually really neither of them are doing very well on their softs, so we are going to get a chance to close down on them. Tanaka's just 3 seconds behind Porsche now, but she's done pushing on fuel with 3 laps to go. 2 laps to go as we cross the start-finish line. Florsh now within a second of Hadjar, but you got a double DRS there with Maloney leading Hadjar out. We certainly have a battery for a push. We've got the ability to push on the tires and lean on them here. But can we get a run? They just keep swapping positions, but we're going to go up the inside of Maloney and then continue on the outside of Hadjar and get both of them up to P16. It's not a terribly useful position, but it at least gets us ahead of a team for the day. That is something next year we're going to have to start thinking a lot more about, especially if we're not scoring points very often. Flourish has picked up 7 this season, and we already know that that is just not going to be good enough. We got a second and a half away from Hadjar very quickly there. 3.5 seconds from Magnussen, who's right on the back of Drugovich, which means, yeah, it's a little too far back to do anything.
Max Verstappen over the finish line, and
At least Tanaka comfortably finished on the lead lap, but just not quite having the pace she needs to have. Oh, there we go. Within 1 second, right at the final corner. And that is Flourish's season done with a P16. A lot more competitive for Flourish since we took control. Instead of a lot of races like Tanaka's having right now, where she's 3 seconds away from Pourchaire, but otherwise off the back to everybody else. That was kind of the normal for Flourish before, for a lot of races, and then occasionally she'd be around P16.
What a
got an achievement for winning the
for
fastest
the
pit stop
driver.
award. Verstappen claims the win today. The final standings in the drivers is Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell, Stroll, Sainz, Tsunoda, Norris, Zhou, Gasly, and Ocon. Ollie Behrman ends up still in 11th, 40 points ahead of the next car. Great job by Behrman. Really fantastic 80 points. We easily could have gotten another 80 and been 8th. In fact, we had been 7th, right? So maybe would have been that little bit higher up. Pourchaire, Albon, Piastri, the only ones in the 30s. Then the drop off to the I scored a couple times this season. Logan Sargent, Magnussen, where they both had 2 good races where they were like 4th or 5th, but otherwise only finished in the points a couple other times. But Flourish did that once and no other scores. She got her 7 points in one go. So all 3 of them kind of did that, but at least Sargent and Magnussen scored a couple times otherwise to get the additional points they needed. 17th for Flourish. That is actually her career best in the Drivers' Championship. She had only scored 1 other time, and it was 1 point, 2 points. So she's got a long ways to go yet. She gets better and better. She's been on that 75 for quite a few races. So she's got to be close to a 76 now. Tanaka's probably close to a 66 now, but did not beat Hadjar in the end, and that was the only other driver not to score. But the field was really close this season, and I have a feeling that it's going to be a little more stretched out, at least at the start of next season. Ferrari with the Constructors' Championship ahead of Red Bull, and then Alpine in the final race overtook Mercedes after scoring 26 today. Really strong result from them, and Mercedes had turned their focus to next year's car. They slipped to 4th, McLaren 5th, Alfa Romeo 6th, and then the huge drop to us in 7th, but of course we only scored 7 points after moving on from Ollie Behrman, and I think he would have had another 80 for us, meaning we would have been 6th, and that sounds right because that's where we had been. Aston Martin certainly closed the gap on us, but they still ended up being 35 points behind in the end. Haas at 34 total for the season, a little bit further off in AlphaTauri, scoring just 3 points all year. But we found ourselves racing them more often than not down the stretch, and that is a worry because in that sort of setup, or if you take Flourish, double her second half of the season performance, 14 is still only going to be good enough for 9th next year. We're going to need a little bit more, but if we do have a little bit stronger advantage to open the season, maybe, just maybe, she can get us about 20 points in that first half before it gets more competitive. If she's good enough down the stretch to be better than she was this year, because progression, right? Even if the gap we had closes down, as long as we're still number 1, maybe she scores more points down the stretch, something like 12. That would give her about 32, and maybe, just maybe, we can beat Haas, or whoever is that car. We know that Aston Martin and Haas continue to develop down the stretch, meaning they could be a little further off. So if we're lucky, I think at best we're looking at 8th next season. I think one of them is going to be strong enough to beat us, but maybe we are strong enough to beat one of them. Maybe we're strong enough to still be well ahead of AlphaTauri. Maybe we're competitive on a regular basis, closer to the top 10 with Florsch anyway. So we're on to our December driver update, beginning with Florsch, +1 to cornering, +1 to that worst one, adaptability. That'd be almost nice at this point if we got to a 99 there so it could just stop. Seems to be the one thing that she's going to be perfect at. As for Tanaka, +1 to cornering, +3 to +1 to reactions, and +1 to accuracy. That's definitely a good trio of points. Now that we're into off-season mode, it is making sense that we are getting less attribute points here. Meanwhile, for Brun, though, that's a good haul. +1 to smoothness, obviously needed. +1 to defending, +2 to reactions, and +1 to accuracy. That's very good for this time of year. So our final training setup for the year for our pit crew, we'll see gains and advantages over where we were at last year, for the most part, one exception. So in terms of the pit crew attributes, we're coming in at almost straight 92 across the board with a 91 on new tires on. So I've really gotten those relatively balanced out. I think last season we finished up at this point at the end of December with a couple 88s and a couple of 91s. Like everything kind of fell into that range. So overall, we've brought that up a little bit further. Car building last year probably finished up at about a 38, 39. We're at a 44 this year. It's definitely making progress, still lagging way behind, but we're slowly making up ground in the car building department. And actually a lot of that ground is just being made up right now here in this December. So overall car building, it's still not looking good. But chance of mistake, 4.5% is what we're down to. And yet we still get a lot of mistakes. Really surprising. Based on the number of pit stops we go through versus the number of mistakes we have, it was disproportionate this season. The last season really wasn't. I think we had 2 all year. And that was proportional. This year, the percentage is lower by at least 2%. And we had triple that. I mean, we had probably 6, 7 mistakes this season. That was a lot. It was a bit of a rough year for the pit crew. And it added a lot of extra fatigue that I was constantly having to deal with, trying to negate that so we wouldn't get more mistakes. Mistakes compounding mistakes. As for the estimated pit stop time, again, last year I made a huge push in December, in January to get us where we needed and wanted to be. However, with last year, I think what I ended up at our end of year tally was 239. We're at a 24 flat. So we're about 1/100th behind where we were a year ago on that one. So really we just maintained this year throughout the season where we were equivalent wise pit stop time a year ago. Maybe just a hair behind 1/100th. It is like a tiny difference. It's 1/100th. It's not a tenth. It's it's not a big round number, not a big solid number. Or even a big partial number. It's very small, very minor. And yes, I think we gained even more than 0.04 last season in December. I focused on it a bit more than I have here, trying to set the other areas up. Definitely spending more on car building. Otherwise, we easily would have gotten that one more 100th that we needed to be exactly where we were a year ago. That being said, that means we're pretty stable on pit stop time while making gains, making improvements in the other areas. So it's been a good year, and we continue to grow. And of course, our pit crew manager, she is growing and developing and pushing our boundaries and our limits and our rate of development further and further yet. She's almost to a stage where she only has one attribute left to even gain anything on, as she's already got a 100 and she's got 2 mid-90s. a 94 in one case, where you can see that directly correlated to our pit crew maximum. Speaking of Hannah Barnard, now an 88 overall, but really it does not do her justice because her training is a 100. The aptitude, a 94, and processes, a 94. That's kind of the other one right now that you want to get that a little bit more on. Our simulator upgrade to that final level, level 5, is finally done. I've got a bunch of facilities that are starting to need refurbishing that will hit early in the not early now off season, but early in the calendar year portion of off season, so that it's ready in time for the first race, but not necessarily right now while we're not racing. Taking decreased efficiency doesn't hurt as bad, but it can hurt a little, but it'll save us, millions of dollars in the grand scheme of things, especially if you do that year after year. For the moment, though, big payout here, and finances are suddenly looking solid. I mean, we were just in 20 million range. Suddenly it's 47 million, but we've got a turn of the year come in, and there's going to be a big chunk of that pulled out. We'll see what we have left come January 1st and see whether it's worthwhile at that point to make our next facility upgrade. There's no active upgrade happening. That was the only one, the one that just finished. We already saw this one coming, but we have won the fastest pit stop challenge for the year. 12 million. Very nice payout for that one. Well worth the time and effort and the strategy in which I've developed that process as we've grown quite good over time. Confirmation of our 7th place finish. Our team rating for the year going up, so that's good. That 7th place has done well for the team. Unlike the 12 million payout for the fastest pit stop, the end of season review is simply just a $1.5 million payout. Very small in comparison. Review of our regulation changes coming for the year. Season prize share is going to be catered more towards the back end of the grid, but not necessarily to the team at the very back of the grid, so we certainly want to avoid that one, especially if we're trying to keep our job in the coming year. But low speed cornering for the front and rear wing take huge hits. I did a lot of research projects on that pair, and particularly the chassis, which is really, really expensive to manufacture new chassis every time you do an upgrade. So doing numerous research projects and getting substantial gains on the chassis during the off season actually was a very smart move, I think. The underfloor would be the same sort of thing, but I've already upgraded the underfloor significantly. The chassis was something that was lagging behind those two expensive to manufacture parts. That's the best time to do it. Supposedly, and this seems to always vary once you actually get out there, but our new target for the coming season is 7th once again. One of the disadvantages to finally having an all-female lineup is we no longer have that male driver to assign to all of those driver appearances and maximize the cash we can get out of that one. Now, we're going to have to start relying on both drivers and minimizing those appearances. It is going to cost us a little bit of money this year. I think we're about maybe 6 million shy of where we were a year ago. At 105 million, that's going to make a pretty small difference. I mean, $500K a month is all. It's not nothing, but it's certainly not huge. Our balance for the coming year, it's hardly even a negative, only a $6 million drop as we go to start the season, though we're not done with that early spending, but we're still looking pretty good on the finances, at least for the moment. And here is our breakdown. Chassis. I have gained 3% to engine cooling, 6, almost 7% to airflow middle, and 6.5% for drag reduction. Huge gains for our chassis entering the new season. Front wing, where we've taken a huge loss, we gain 4.5% in brake cooling with no loss. We lost 0.09 in high speed. We've covered that off. We lost 0.33 in medium speed. We have all but covered that off. And we lost 0.48 in low speed, and we have covered that off. So we have no loss. When it comes to the almost 9% that we lost in airflow sensitivity, we have also covered that off, and we've gained 4.5% in airflow front. So our front wing has come out slightly better than what it was, despite a pretty significant drop due to regulation changes. We did well. For the rear wing, high speed, same thing. Medium speed, less so, and low speed, less so, but still minor losses, 0.06 and 0.12. Not bad. I think we can still cover that off by time we get to the start of the season. Airflow sensitivity saw a 9% drop. We already recovered a little over 7 of that, so we've got a couple percent left to go. When you do add in the drag reduction DRS delta, for now, the rear wing is a wash. It's level, and I think we'll get back that last little bit to see us come out ahead before the season starts. So we've done really, really well with this regulation change. What have we gained elsewhere, though? I have done projects on others as well, not as focused as the chassis was. We got one side pod upgrade done, so we gained about 0.5% across the board. Nothing on the underfloor, and suspension saw one minor upgrade as well. So nothing major there. Definitely big chassis upgrade, and we offset the changes for the front and rear wing, which means our car is going to start the year better than where it finished. And in theory, we shouldn't expect that from other teams. While it was still minor and it was just front and rear wings, 30 and 20 and 10, like the 10's not a big deal. 20's a pretty major change. And 30% is a massive change. We managed to cover both of those off, so this was minor regulation changes. It was 2 parts. It was 2 components. So even though others are going to take a hit on that and they're not going to be as good aerodynamically to start the season, I don't think we're looking at anything significant in terms of the gain. But we did well regardless. For that regulation change, we're looking at 7th or 8th for the coming year. This past year, that was $47 million in prize money. In a year, it'll be 51. So plus $4 million. Or plus $3 million if it's 8th place. Looking forward to that extra prize share. Also, you're taking away 3, 4, 7 million at the top. That redistribution is definitely going to help us out as we try to survive and hang on and start working our way up the grid with that all-female lineup in place now on what we hope to be a permanent basis and not switching for survival type basis. No changes to the sporting regs. Everything stays the same for the coming season, including that updated gearbox, ERS, and engine limit. Florsch never took a single penalty all season. We did have to take some with Tanaka, and as long as she remains inconsistent the way she drove that second half of the season, even if that improves a little bit, she's destined to be having multiple penalties this year. But Florsch looks like we're in position to not. And there was far fewer penalties up and down the grid this season with the increased limit. At this time last season, it was pointed out to me why our acceleration just can't move up the grid high enough. And it's because I use the Mercedes engine, and that makes total sense. Powerbull. The Red Bull powertrain has more power, better acceleration, purely, naturally. No matter what upgrades I put on, we're not going to overcome their level of acceleration. Now, with reduced drag, enough reduced drag, we can get the best overall top speed. We just can't seem to overcome the acceleration component. We can get very close, but we can't get above them. Maybe one day, but it does largely come down to choosing the engine that doesn't have the best overall power, but it offers us significant advantages in other areas that I don't think I'm ever going to change it at this point. For the remainder of this playthrough, we are going to be sticking with that Mercedes engine, even though best team finish was 4th and everybody else had a top 3 this last year. I don't think it's because of an inferior engine, though. Like I said, that acceleration piece, it is something. There is something to that. So for the internal car report, again, we put research into things and we saw some solid gains in certain areas. and we just about offset the losses that existed. There's supposed to be a little bit of a backtracking to start the year because of those regulation changes, but what have we done? Well, we gained 0.01 in top speed. We lost 0.005 in acceleration. That's going to be a little bit harder to recover, but our DRS effectiveness has gone up by 3%. How did we... Okay, I'm a little confused how we've lost. We've lost a lot. As for the pit crew performance, it's always a big one. We're looking at bigger losses. The better we get, the bigger the loss, right? So, minus 11. Front and rear jacks, wheel gun, wheel on, car release. On minus 5 on car setup. We're starting the year better than where we finished the year prior, so that's making up ground, but we've got a lot to cover off here. As for the speed part, a minus 7, it's a low number. Like, we're starting from a 60 where everything else is at, into the 80s and 90s. It's amazing that the speed part is as bad as it is, and yet we're kind of faster than everybody else. Nobody seems to be covering that off. That doesn't seem to be terribly well balanced when it comes to the code, the mechanics. It's hard. It's hard just to maintain what's considered a 60 level speed. And you've seen the others that were much faster at the start of this game be slower than us now. I mean, we won the pit crew challenge, which was based on time, not consistency, right? Consistency is a factor. If you have mistakes, if you have penalties, you're not going to get a fast time. And that hurt us from time to time. And we weren't terribly comfortable as number one, but we were always near the top. Always. That was with a 60. We're back down to a 53 again. And we'll recover, at least 3 to 4 points of that before we ever get to the first race. It's off season. The expectations are minimal, but here's what we have for our driver development update. Yikes, nothing. +1 to smoothness for Brun is it. They went on vacation, and they took a vacation. January training alone is going to get back a lot of what we lost. We're going to get back +6 of the 11 that was lost, so more than half of it, or just over half of what was lost. And then as for the car building side of it, we'll have gained back. We'll be right back where we were at the end of November already by the end of January. And then for the pit stop time, we had been a 2:44 at the end of the season itself. We'll be back to 2:49 already by now. Still a little ways to go to get back to where we were, but not that far off. It's a good month for sure, and it's really, really nice having that ability to take very little rest. I mean, after a day one off, that's solid. I did 2 full days of nothing but jacks training and nothing but use tires off. We've built ourselves up. We're looking really good already entering the season. And that's just the end of January. We still have February also. We got 53 days, so we'll have most of February to make additional gains. We had offset everything. I'm wondering if the reason why we saw significant losses is the weight. Because the weight resets every year. Apparently, it does with it take the performance gains back away from it. So the first thing to do every season is go through each component and shed the weight. Shed as much of that weight as you can to get those gains back and get us back to where we were. And then that first upgraded component is the one that goes on the car and makes you about where we were last year, or with some gains already, meaning we could really be ahead. But we've got to start with the ones that are going to be the hardest. So the chassis, the underfloor, begin with those, then get the quick ones a little bit later. Turns out we have put enough money away to go ahead and invest in our next upgrade, which is the suspension simulator. $17 million for that one. Final upgrade for that one, and we're really getting down to the end of it. The factory is level 4. It's going to need an upgrade. Design center is already maxed out. We need to refurbish here at some point before it gets too bad. But the car part test center is the other one. So we've got 2 car development facilities remaining. These are the expensive ones. After that, it's all about just maintaining, which is going to make life much easier once we get there. Staff facilities, there's still 4 to go, but it's all scouting department and cheap. We'll get them eventually. Operations facilities are done, but there are some to refurbish there, but they're generally cheap to do that. It won't cost us more than I don't know, maybe 5 million or less between the 3 of them to do that. So we'll get to them, but probably not until I'd say start of February, so that they're back in time for the season. But as for those staff ones, the race simulator is one we want, so it'll be refurbished here in 17 days. First 4 designs for the coming year are on the way. None of them are seeing significant gains because our car is we're approaching 90% in most of the areas. Once you get to about 80%, gains become minimal. The main thing is shedding the weight. So the first 4 are shedding the weight. We're saving the wings for last because the time to research is less. The time to manufacture is significantly less than the other components. So starting with the ones that take more time is the plan. Formula 3 driver lineup for the coming season. Hoffman at Prima. She's a 55 overall now. Isabella Amos. We have a new female in the lineup for Trident. She's a 54 overall coming in. Bianchi, now a 58 overall at ART. Krista Keller is back, 53 overall now at Van Amersfoort. Betty Fallbush, 61 overall. Good lineup there for MP. Sandrine Michel also getting a second year. She's a 51 overall. Rodin Winkler is a 47 overall at Roden Carlin also. Campos has Suzanne Wagner. I think that's another new one, 49. So there's at least 2 new females in F3 lineups, giving us more options down the road. No additional females there. Did any of them make it to F2 this year? I'm thinking the answer is no, but let's see if that's actually the case. Quality-wise, Prima easily could have hired one of them, as multiples are that good or better. We got a 72 overall here and multiple 72 overalls. Kinsey Creswell has been in there since the very beginning. Is still only a 65 overall. Really surprised that Creswell has continued to keep a seat. We got a 76 overall in Skoglund. That's the best rated driver, I think, in F2. Yes. Well, no females in F2, which is a bit of a surprise because there's a couple of them that were absolutely ready for that upgrade. But of course, at least one of those, Bernadette Braun, was on our team as a reserve driver already, so we've kind of taken that opportunity away from her. Tanaka would also easily be there by now. Okay, well, on to the F1 rosters. Verstappen still at Red Bull. Ocon is his teammate now, 91 overall for him. Sullivan, their reserve driver. Leclerc for Ferrari, along with Russell, and Bogdanovich, the reserve. Alpine, Porsche, and Sonoda, 90-91, with Palou. Mercedes, Norris, and Sainz, with Colapinto. McLaren have Magnussen and Stroll, with Mansell. Alfa Romeo, Zhou Guan Yu, Zane Maloney, and Barnard. Our lineup, of course, is unchanged, but for Aston Martin, it's Logan Sargent and Pierre Gasly. So Ollie Behrman did not get a seat. Poor guy. He was so good last season. That's disappointing. I'm not sure, though. At this point, I'm not sure if I'm willing to sacrifice one of our drivers to save our job and go back to an Ollie Behrman. But he is available, so it's something to consider at some point late in the season. Kind of thinking we're going to go for it. This is it. This is our moment. It's now or never type scenario, and we do it. We keep our job. If we lose our job, it's game over. We've given it plenty of seasons. We've got the all-females. It's the challenge. I don't think we're going to go back. I don't want to take a step back. we're going forward from here. For Haas, Dragovic, Piastri, with Montoya as the reserve driver for AlphaTauri. It's Albon, it's Hadjar, and Fittipaldi. It's a lot of good drivers. I mean, we're looking at, what, an 84? Is that the lowest? No, Magnussen at an 81 for McLaren is the lowest rated driver, which means we are still, we're still the lowest by quite a bit. And, past that 81, it's an 84, so it's quite the jump. Florsch is almost 10 points behind every other driver, with one exception in Magnussen. All right, folks, well, that sets us up for the upcoming season. There's still a month and a half to go. There's still that first wave of upgrades coming in, and then how I choose to proceed from there. But to get that one round of upgrades, I've divided evenly our simulator time through all of that. So I divided it evenly through 6 components. 4 of those will be done here in a couple, 2 to 3 weeks. Then we'll be able to get those other 2 on the way, but then I'll have decisions on if I want to make additional upgrades from there or begin the season with those and wait till we have time again. For the most part, it's going to be hard to make significant gains because, like I said, we're approaching 90% in most of those areas. It's about 88 to 90 in most components, so there's just not as much left to get out of it, and you kind of need that simulator time to get something out of it for the most part. Staff ratings 87, 85. Race engineers are still weak, but we'll take a look at the pools. We already know that there's 2 new drivers at the very least in the pool this year. Can we find more? Is there going to be a new race engineer who's a 70 overall? That'd be awesome if we find one. Obviously, there's no reason to change the other 3 positions. They're in good shape. But that's going to do it for this episode. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.